Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, host of Montgomery County Media's hardest-hitting political talk show, 21 This Week, and the moderator for this primary debate for the candidates for the county executive's office. The candidates are Democrat Phil Andrews, Doug Duncan, Isaiah Leggett, and Republican Jim Shalek. This forum is hosted by Montgomery Community Media and sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County in conjunction with the Gazette Newspapers, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County, the Rockville Chamber of Commerce, and the African American Chamber of Commerce. Lena Barnes, the president of the League of Women Voters, is here today as the timekeeper, and she's going to keep you all in line. The panel is here today to propose questions to the candidates, and representing their organization in our panel is Kate Alexander, a journalist with the Gazette Newspapers, Mayra Bayonet, Director of Community Outreach for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Montgomery County, and Andrea Jolly, President of the Rockville Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank everyone here at MCM, the League of Women Voters, and the Chambers for all their hard work that went into coordinating this forum. I want to thank the candidates for sharing their time with us today. It's important that participating in forums like this gives voters the information they need to make informed choices. We plan on having a lively exchange of ideas today, with the candidates giving opening statements of 1 minute, followed by questions, where I might even ask a follow-up question or two, and then closing statements for each candidate. The questions were prepared by the sponsors of the debate. The candidates are seated in alphabetical order, but the opening and closing statements and all of the questions was determined by a random drawing before the taping began. With that in mind, let's start the forum, and we're going to start with opening statements from Phil Andrews.
Hello, I'm Phil Andrews. I'm running for county executive because we need to get our competitive edge back in Montgomery County. I've served 16 years on the county council. I've worked to bring progressive reform and fiscal responsibility to the county, wrote the living wage law, wrote the county smoke-free restaurant law, wrote the law that reformed our police disability retirement system, was chief sponsor of the law that expanded employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And I've been a strong leader for making sure that we spend in a way that is sustainable and affordable. Our county faces a lot of challenges in the next year, next 2 years, next 3 years, in order to make sure that we improve our ability to compete in this region. We need to do better in Annapolis, that's part of it, but we also have to control our own policies in terms of spending and taxes so we become more competitive, and that we can then continue to be the progressive county that we've been for many years.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Shalek, you're next.
Thank you. I'm Jim Shalek. I'm the Republican candidate for county executive. And being the Republican, I really appreciate being invited to this. It really shows your fairness, and I really appreciate it. Let me just tell you a little bit about my priority. I moved here 25 years ago from New York City to work in the Justice Department. Prior to that, I was an assistant DA in the Bronx, New York, assistant attorney general of New York State, and at one point, chief of the Bronx DA's Homicide Bureau. When I was in the Bronx DA's office, I prosecuted David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, for 3 murders he committed in the Bronx. I had seen what evil can do to a family and to the city of New York. That's why my priority is public safety. I never, ever want to see a CNN helicopter over any of our schools. I want to see a police presence at all of our schools. I want to see a uniformed marked cruiser at all our schools. And I want to get all the 10,000 plus children being taught in trailers, out of trailers, into classrooms. There's a lot of other issues. Those are my priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Shalek. Mr. Duncan.
Great. Thank you, Casey. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching. I'm Doug Duncan. I'm asking for your vote to be your next county executive on June 24th in the Democratic primary. I had the great fortune to be county executive in years past, where we did an awful lot of good things together. We rebuilt Silver Spring, we built Strathmore Hall, we got more money from the state of Maryland for education and for transportation. We worked very hard to make this a community where people's lives got better. And I'm worried about our future. I want to make sure that our future is as bright as our past has been. And to do that, we can't continue with the status quo. We have many challenges in front of us. Our schools are overcrowded. Our achievement gap among our students is widening. We lead the state of Maryland in job loss, and we need to restore the faith and trust that people have in their county government. And the Silver Spring Transit Center is the biggest example of that. 4 years late, $30 million over budget, and still no plan on how to fix it, how to open it safely for the people of this county. I ask for your vote on June 24th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Leggett, your
Yeah.
opening statement, please.
My name is Ike Leggett, running for re-election as County Executive of Montgomery County, Maryland. I did not have the luxury of serving in good times. I served in the real difficult times, the most difficult economic challenges since the Great Depression. As a result of our leadership over the last 7 years, Montgomery County today has the highest financial reserves in the history of the county. We solved more than $3 billion in budgetary gaps. And as a result, we now have a police force that is higher. We have crime that is lower. We have affordable housing that is much, much higher. And we have construction on major projects that begin in Montgomery County throughout the entire county. It is a result of committed, dedicated leadership in the difficult times that we found over the last 7 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Our first question is going to be asked by Kate Alexander of the Gazette Newspapers, and it will go to Mr. Shallak.
Mr. Shallak, who would you not accept campaign contributions from and why?
I would accept contributions from anybody who wanted to contribute, to be honest with you. Obviously, if they're a corporation or an individual that we didn't know that was any problem with them, we would accept contributions. As a Republican, I'm the underdog, and we need funding. There's no question about it. The Democrats have hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars. So unless there's a problem with a donor, I accept donations from anybody.
Mr. Andrews, same question.
Well, I have a policy of not accepting campaign funds from interest groups, and that includes corporations, unions, PACs, and developers. I think it's important to restore public confidence in government, and that's why I have had that policy since I ran for the county council a long time ago. And I have introduced legislation to institutionalize the opportunity for candidates to run for a county office without being funded by interest groups. I've introduced a public financing bill that has been co-sponsored by all of my colleagues. It has drawn the support of Common Cause, of the Sierra Club, the ACLU, Progressive Maryland, and I believe a lot of the public, because the public is fed up with politics as usual, with broken politics, with interest groups that are dominating campaign financing. So this is a way to expand the opportunity for more people to run for office, to reduce the influence of interest groups, and to make government more responsive to the public.
Mr. Leggett, same question.
I think my campaign finance has been pretty broad, and so I do not exclude anyone. But I would want to make certain that all campaign expenditures, all campaign donations are disclosed, and that you diversify those expenditures as well as the donors. If we allow that, then you are not subject to any particular group or organization. If you make certain that you have an open door policy, that all people can contribute, certainly you will not accept contributions from someone that's legal or that's in trouble with the law or some other challenges. But overall, I think that it's good to have the ability to collect campaigns across the board, so long as they're not resolved in one particular area, one particular group.
Mr.
Yeah,
Duncan.
Maryland's got a long list of campaign contribution laws and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And clearly I have followed the law. I think all of us have, and I think it's something that we need to do. They've changed the law for the next election cycle to change how people can contribute and who can contribute to things. But I too agree that if you have a broad set of donors, it means you got broad support from your community. And I think that's an important sign of showing support throughout the community. So we work very hard to get contributions to the campaign, to run the campaign that we need to let people in the county know my message and of bringing change to the county, of growing the job base, of helping our schools and things like that. So I'm very supportive of the state laws and fully comply with them.
Follow-up question?
Next question, Mr. Leggett. As you ask to manage budget gaps, how will you protect the economically vulnerable and the programs that serve them within the scope of the office you are seeking?
Well, first of all, you make sure they have a sustainable budget going forward to ensure that you have the capacity to respond to the challenges and difficulties that the most vulnerable face. But secondly, you need to also ensure that the rest of Montgomery County understand that there are people in our county that are poor. There are people who go to bed hungry every night. There are people without proper shelter in Montgomery County. We have more kids on free and reduced meals in Montgomery County than the entire District of Columbia system. And we need to continue to work to make sure that we resolve that. But we cannot resolve a problem by denying that we have a problem. And then clearly economic development, economic growth, and job growth helps everyone, including the most vulnerable.
Mr. Shalak, please, the same
Yeah,
question.
certainly the needs of the vulnerable have to be a priority. The weakest and the most vulnerable among us have to be protected, no question about it. But we also can't, we've got to stop putting our hands in the taxpayers' pockets. We've got to think out of the box to get revenues. We've got to cut spending in non-essential services. We have a $5 billion budget. We've got to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. I'm sure there's plenty we can cut that's non-essential. And I'm going to repeat this. We are the only county in the United States that owns the liquor stores. Repeat, only county in the United States that owns the liquor stores. We should privatize that. There was a report recently, we can come up with $50 million right away. So we got to think out of the box to raise revenues, but protecting the vulnerable is a priority.
Mr. Duncan, the same question.
Yeah, you know, we find ourselves fighting over a shrinking pie, and the recession hit this county, state, country very, very hard. And when you talk about protecting the vulnerable in our community and finding the resources to do that, we need to make sure that Montgomery County becomes once again the economic engine for the state of Maryland. We now lead the state of Maryland in job loss. We have lost 11,000 jobs in this county since last July. Since 2007, we have added 8,600 jobs in Montgomery County. Washington, D.C. has added over 36,000. Fairfax has added over 50,000. Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, Prince George's County, and even Howard County have added more jobs than we have. We're coming out of this recession much, much weaker than neighboring jurisdictions. And we need to focus on helping our existing businesses by revamping permitting services and economic development. We need to focus on the innovation economy by encouraging startups to come here and grow their companies here. And we need to focus on revitalization of our town centers, which is why I want to make Wheaton the next major revitalization project for Montgomery County.
Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Andrews, please.
Well, our needs have grown substantially in Montgomery County in the last 20 years. Our poverty rate, as measured by the free and reduced meal rate in our schools, is now 34%. We need to do a number of things to address that. One is we need to get a fairer share of our state tax dollars back from Annapolis. We get about 20 cents on the dollar. Annapolis needs to recognize, and we need to have a strong united delegation fighting for us in Annapolis, and the county executive needs to lead that charge. We also need to make sure that we have the money in our own budget for programs that help the vulnerable, whether people are abused, whether they're poor, whether they're infirm, or whether they have disabilities. We need to make sure that we have that moral obligation fulfilled through our budget. A lot of our budget is tied up in salaries and benefits. That's 70% of the budget. If we spend too much in that area, and I think our pay raises that we have seen in the last 2 years of 13.5% to 19.5% have been excessive, very expensive, $85 million. That eats up a lot of the budget that we need to use for other purposes as well.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Our next question is coming from the Rockville Chamber of Commerce.
Is Montgomery County business friendly? If so, how would you address the perception that it isn't? And if it is, how would you create, or if it is not, how would you create a more friendly business community and climate? And we'll start with Mr. Duncan.
No, Montgomery County is not business friendly, and that's been a major problem for us. It's why we lead the state in job loss since last July. It's why we are growing fewer jobs than many other jurisdictions around us. So we've got two real issues here. One is the state of Maryland tax structure puts us in an uncompetitive position with Virginia. And two, the county government bureaucracy is not business friendly. We need to revamp, revitalize, redo the Department of Permitting Services, which is really making it difficult for people to open up a business here. We need to revamp our Department of Economic Development to get them focused on customer service again. We need to focus on the innovation economy. We shouldn't be closing the most successful biotech incubator in the state of Maryland, evicting 38 biotech companies to put in a federal cyber research center. We can do both here in this county. We should make Montgomery County the startup center for this region, and we've got to focus on that as a way to help grow jobs.
Mr. Leggett.
I think there's a perception, and that perception sometimes needs to hit reality. I think when you look at what we've done in Montgomery County in the last 3 years, we've increased jobs by 30,000 jobs. We've included a great deal of change. We've included change that have made permitting service one of the major success stories in the county. You can go in now and get a permit for fire services now that used to take 8 weeks, you can get it in 3 days. The whole system has been revamped. In fact, the head of the department has received the award from the commercial sector, giving her great credit for her work. I think there's a perception. We need to work through that perception. But if you look at the changes that have been made compared to what we had before, those changes are much more conducive for business. But we need to go through that cycle to make sure that people fully understand it.
Mr. Andrews, can you answer the same question?
Sure. There are many great things about Montgomery County, but the business climate is not one of them. And the county can do something about that. The county sets tax rates and decides what its own budget is. The county's energy tax is by far the region's highest, and we're told over and over again by businesses that it's a disincentive to growing jobs in this county. In 2010, Mr. Leggett proposed doubling the county's energy tax and said that it should be limited to 2 years because of the significant impact that it would have on residents and businesses. In 2012, he didn't keep that promise, and he proposed keeping the money. The last 3 years, I have led efforts on the county council, working with my colleagues, and we have reduced the 2010 increase in that energy tax by 27%. As county executive, I commit that I will phase out that increase by the end of the term so that we keep our word and that we make our county more competitive in an area that it definitely needs to be.
Mr. Shalek?
We are business unfriendly. The taxes are too high, too many regulations. I agree with Phil, the energy tax should be reduced. I would do away with the bag tax. Everybody hates the bag tax, and the small business owner has to deal with the bureaucracy of paperwork and everything. Bag tax should go. You got to recruit business here. I'm a business-friendly guy. I'm going to recruit business. I'm going to give them tax incentives, because when they move here, they got to build structures, they got to relocate hundreds of people. I'm going to give them tax incentives to move here, and I'm going to build them a road if they need it, or widen a road if they need it. You know, for 10 years after I moved here, my wife and I were trying to go to the Rio, the center with the movies off 270. There was no road cutting in there. For 10 years, we ended up in Silver Spring. You've got to give businesses incentives to come here. They're going to come here if they're going to make a lot of money. Under my administration, they're going to make a lot of money, but by making a lot of money, they're going to increase our revenue base. And we have one person that should deal with a company to walk them through all the maze of regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Shalek.
Last time you end up in Chevy Chase.
Multiple trips.
I'm going to, on behalf of the African American Chamber of Commerce, I'm going to ask the next question of the candidates. Access to affordable housing and a stable housing market in the county is important to our communities. Foreclosures and homelessness are still challenges. In addition, there is a great need for more affordable workforce housing in the county. How would you address and solve these problems? We're going to start with Mr. Andrews.
Affordable housing is a need in our county. We are a very expensive place to live. That's one of the reasons I'm running for office, is to make it a less expensive place for people to live so more people can stay here when they retire and when they graduate from college and come back here. But in terms of what we need to do to make our affordable housing more available to people, I think there are 3 things that we need to do. One is, first, we need to make sure that we don't lose the existing affordable housing that we have. And the council took an action recently in the Long Branch sector plan to not rezone the properties along the multifamily apartment building area along Piney Branch Road, which will be the site of the future Purple Line going through, in order to avoid the predictable loss of affordable housing there. So that's something we can do. Second, we need to continue to fund the Housing Initiative Fund at levels that allow us to leverage a lot of private dollars. When I joined the county council in 1999, in 1998 and 9, the Housing Initiative Fund was $2.5 million. One of the first actions I took with my former colleagues, Councilmember Silverman Village, was to propose to triple it, and we did.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Duncan?
Yeah, the reason I first ran for public office for Rockville City Council was because I grew up in Rockville, loved it, wanted to raise my own family there, and I couldn't afford to buy a house there. So I ran on a platform of affordable housing, got elected to the Rockville City Council, and we were able to do some very good things to help people get more affordable housing in Rockville. And when I came to the county, I was very fortunate in that our county has been a leader for decades, a national leader for decades, in the provision of affordable housing. And it's something that I was proud to continue and carry on and enhance through many different ways. We averaged 3,000 retained or new affordable housing units per year when I was county executive. That's 36,000 units over the 12 years. We created a dedicated source of funding for the Housing Initiative Fund and we've done many other things. We need to concentrate development around our metro stations, help get more affordable housing around there, but clearly that's an issue for us. But the good news is that there's a culture in this county of supporting affordable housing and finding new ways to provide that, and that's something that I'm very supportive of.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Shalek.
Yeah, to me, I think we have to work with developers. To me, the word developer is not a bad name, not a bad word. I want to work with developers, keep them here. They're going to they want to build their buildings and charge $6,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. That's fine. They can do that. I'm going to help them build the buildings here and not move to Arlington. But because of that, I want contributions from the developers into the affordable housing market. You want to move here and make money? Fine. We got the demographics to make you rich. But you're going to have to contribute to our affordable housing stock. And that's what I want to do, work with business, not against them.
Thank you, Mr. Shalek. Mr. Leggett.
In 2010, I received the award from a national organization and also from a regional organization for my leadership on affordable housing. An example of what we've done, I provided a neighborhood of $320 million that have been leveraged for over $1 billion with the private sector to build affordable housing. We've built more affordable housing or maintained more affordable housing in my administration in the history of this county. We provided more money than in any other period of time in the history of this county. We've gone from a period of where we produced fewer homes, less money, less than $15 million a year, to now $40+ million a year, well over anything that we've ever done in the past. It is a record that we are proud of, but we can do more. Working with the private sector, we can enhance this. But this administration has gone leaps and bounds in providing affordable housing. The unfortunate task is that we still have a large number of people out there that continue to need affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Now, because Ms. Barnes is sitting there and is our enforcer, I get to ask the questions on behalf of the League of Women Voters. So, once upon a time, Montgomery County had its own clinic for mental health services, which is now closed. What would your administration do to improve mental health services in the county? And our first question is to Mr. Shalek.
Well, as a private lawyer, I represent a lot of people, young people especially, who end up at Noyes, the juvenile facility, or in jail in Clarksburg or Seven Locks. I think we have to concentrate more on dealing with inmates and individuals that come into the criminal justice system and have more mental health experts, issues, involvement in the jails and the facilities, because they're troubled people, and mental illness is a large reason why they're in jail. So I think we have to concentrate on the jail, the adult jail, the juvenile jail, and beef up our resources there. But that is a priority, no question about it.
Thank you, Mr. Shalek. Mr. Duncan.
Yeah, this is a very personal issue for me. My family has a history of mental illness. I personally suffered from major depression 8 years ago, pulled out of the race for governor because of that, and sought treatment to get myself better, and it worked. I'm living proof that treatment works, and that's my message to the public everywhere I go, is that if you're feeling depressed, if you know someone who is depressed, please encourage them to seek treatment. We need to make sure that we've got opportunities for people to get treatment. I was very fortunate. I was a county employee at the time, went to Kaiser Permanente and got the treatment that I needed. But we need to make sure that we're working with the private sector, the private nonprofits, in providing these opportunities for people to get the mental health services that they need. And it's not just mental health, it's people with special needs. We've got all kinds of issues with a rapidly growing population, particularly for children with autism. And I'm going to create a special needs task force that's going to take a look at all of the needs of these populations in our community and make us a national model in working with and in being inclusive of the special needs people in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Andrews.
Well, the good news regarding mental health is there's more coverage for it in health care plans now. That's been progress. But the bad news is that there is a crisis in the shortage of beds for people who are severely mentally ill or experiencing a severe mental breakdown. So we see that in our jail. We see that with people that come through our Clarksburg facility and through Seven Locks. We had a very sobering briefing recently by our Director of Corrections because a larger and larger percent of our jail population needs immediate mental health hospitalization. And yet, while there's a state law that says that within 12 hours someone must be transported, The fact is that the state only has about 150 beds now, where it used to have 850. So the state has washed its hands of this problem, and our jail now is being used as a major mental health treatment center. And while they do a great job, that's not where it should be. We need to work with the state to resolve that.
Thank you. And Mr. Leggett.
Yeah, I've been very disappointed with the support from the state for mental illness. There are two challenges here. On one hand, we're talking about the challenges we face once people have been diagnosed and are in crisis. We are in a responsive mode at that point in time. The real challenge for us is not when the people are actually in jail and trying to resolve the challenges there. It is to intervene much earlier. Intervention at an earlier stage through this process is a far better area to invest in than in the other areas where we have people who are basically in crisis. And I don't think that we do enough of that. Clearly, I don't think that the county government should be in the role of mandated and, in fact, ensuring that we have the facilities operated by the county government. I think the private sector is better equipped to do that. But we need to support the private sector with the resources and allow them to intervene at a much earlier stage. That is what I think we should do, and we have not done enough of that, not only at the local level, but primarily at the state level.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Now we're going to go back to our panel for the questions. Ms. Alexander from the Gazette.
We'll start with you, Mr. Leggett. In light of problems with the Silver Spring Transit Center, how would you convince taxpayers that our county has the confidence, the capability, and the resources to not fail in building other large projects?
Well, we built over 40-some projects, and I think this is the only one that we've failed at. And I wouldn't think this is a failure of the county government. I think this is a failure of the contractors. We are now on schedule. They're now building the center. We're resolving the last complex pieces of it. And I think that we will be through with this summer, early fall. We intend to get all the monies we need back from the contractors who I think have, in some way, performed some errors of negligence. But I think that we're back on track on this, and we wanted to make sure that we do this right. So I rejected this center because I was not satisfied with what we've seen. I was not satisfied with the contracts that provided us. We could have been in this center some time ago, but I was not satisfied where we were. So we're on track, all the parties in agreement, and they're back in construction, and we should be through with this fairly soon.
Mr. Andrews.
To say that the Silver Spring Transit Center is a debacle is an understatement. And it is a project that should clearly have been done differently. It is a project that existed for years under both Mr. Duncan and Mr. Leggett. I don't know why voters would re-elect either one to finish it, but I do think there are lessons that we can learn from it, that we must learn from it to apply to other construction projects. In fact, our Office of Inspector General in the county has recommended a number of procedures, a number of changes to improve construction oversight, because we can all agree that nothing like this should ever happen again. And when there are projects like the Silver Spring Transit Center that are high on the risk matrix because they are very expensive, they are being built for someone else, their design is unusual or unique, and there are many contractors involved, then it needs extra scrutiny from the very beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Shalik.
Yeah, I've called for a federal criminal grand jury investigation of this Silver Spring Transit Center. It's a disgrace. Tens of millions of dollars overspent, years overdue. The buses can't even ride on the concrete. We're not going to get answers from the Democratic County Council or this administration. The taxpayers deserve answers why tens of millions of dollars of their money is gone, and it's a safety hazard. We need a grand jury to subpoena witnesses and records. There may not have been anything wrong, but were there kickbacks? Was inferior product purchased for the monies we gave them? Were political contributors given contracts? We need answers, and we're not going to get it from the Democrats in this county. A grand jury can answer our questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shalik.
Mr. Duncan.
Yeah, Kate, your question really goes to the heart of the matter. And what's happening here is the public has lost confidence in the ability of our county government to get things done in a timely fashion and on budget. And more people are saying this thing will never be safe, the Silver Spring Transit Center will never be safe, just tear it down. And every time we get a story from Ike Leggett or his administration or the county council, the next story they give is a totally different one. They keep changing their stories about what it's going to cost, who's going to pay for it, when it's going to open. The person who knew in 2010, the county official who knew in 2010 that they were building an unsafe building. Instead of saying stop, said keep building it. And then in 2012 they said stop when it was too late to really do anything about it at that time. And that person is now in charge of the repairs. Why should that person still be in that job? He should be fired. We should bring in new leadership to make sure that we restore public confidence in the county's ability to get this done and get the Silver Spring Transit Center open. 4 years late, $30 million over budget, and still
Thank you, Mr.
no
Duncan.
plan to get it open. It is not on track.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. The next question will be by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
I'm going to start with Mr. Duncan. The bad economy has had a disproportionate impact on the Latino community. What initiatives have you supported or would you propose to increase employment opportunity for Latinos?
We need to increase employment opportunity for everyone in our community. And when I was county executive previously, I helped start the Montgomery County Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I helped start the Hispanic Business Institute here in the county to help Hispanics and Latinos learn business practices, learn how to run a business, learn how to start a business, and open that. But when we lead the state of Maryland in job loss, when we used to lead it in job growth, that's a problem for everyone in our community. And to me, the best social program is a jobs program. We talked before about helping those in most need in our community. Well, the best way to do that is to help them get employment. And to do that, we need to focus on the existing businesses that we have here. We need to focus on the startup economy. Montgomery County should be the leader in the startup economy in this region, but the Leggett administration is closing the Shady Grove Incubator, throwing out 38 biotech startups. They're going to close the Wheaton Incubator, which was started as the minority business incubator for this county. And then when that lease runs out, we are shrinking the co-working space instead of expanding it the way we need to.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Mr. Chalo, please.
Yeah, as the county becomes more diverse, our workforce has to reflect that. We need more Hispanic and African American police, firefighters, first responders, teachers, judges. So the workforce, the government has to reflect the diversity in the community, and I'm all for that, and I would do that.
Thank you, Mr. Shalek.
Mr. Leggett, please.
Yeah. The unemployment in Montgomery County is 4.1%, but that's of everyone. If you look at minority unemployment, it's much higher. Here's what we've done. We brought in a Small Business Plus program, whereby we are now providing somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 million going to small and minority business. We've significantly changed the procurement processes in Montgomery County. We've provided monitoring. We've provided a number of assistance and support to minority, women, and small businesses in Montgomery County. We've expanded it. But what we've also done is provide education, we've provided language training, and we've provided support in a variety of other areas to assist. Clearly, 30,000 jobs that we've now created in the last 3 years leading this region is not enough, because those who are suffering from those job losses are the people in the minority areas who have not gotten those jobs. And what we are doing now are the kinds of things that we need to do to make sure that we make that transition for everyone and not just for a small minority.
Mr. Andrew, please.
Well, I think I'd start by meeting with people to ask them why they think the unemployment rate is higher. There are reasons clearly that are related to education or language, but there are maybe other issues as well. I think that the best way to address the unemployment rate, which is significantly higher than it was, it's 70% higher than it was before the recession, is to make sure that we have a business climate that is inviting, where taxes are reasonable, where there are lots of opportunities to get assistance or advice about how to start a business up, where workers who are students who are going through high school or college have opportunities for vocational training, for career experience in companies that helps them get a leg up when they graduate. Not everyone is going on to college. Not everyone needs to go on to college to be successful, and we shouldn't assume that that is true.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Now, Rockville Chamber of Commerce will ask the next question.
Okay, this question has to do with transportation. What do you consider to be the top 3 transportation projects in Montgomery County? And what is your stance on M83, the Mid-County Highway Extended? And I'd like to start with Mr. Andrews.
Well, I think the county needs to ensure that our transit projects that have been in the works for a long time now, like the Purple Line, the Quarter Cities Transit Way, are built as soon as possible. I've been a strong advocate for both the Purple Line and the Quarter Cities Transitway throughout my entire 16-year career on the council. And those are projects that will clearly benefit people in our county. The Purple Line should be getting started next year, and the Quarter Cities Transitway needs to get started as soon as possible. I think that we also need to use capacity better that we have now. The ICC, for example, is a highly underused highway because of the very expensive tolls. And the tolls need to be reduced by the state so they are reasonable and don't discourage so many people from using that highway. With regard to M83, I oppose it. I don't think it is worth the $400 million or so that it would cost to build it, and the environmental impacts would be very significant. I think we need to move forward as well with bus rapid transit, particularly in the corridors where it's likely to have the most ridership.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
Mr. Leggett, the same question, please.
The reason why we're talking about these projects now is because something I did some years ago. I went forth 7 years ago and called for a state gasoline tax and went to the state and pushed and pushed and pushed till we got it. And people are credited me locally with my efforts to help get that done. So clearly, the Quarter City Transitway is top of the list, Purple Line, and bus rapid transit. We had a groundbreaking ceremony just the other with the Secretary of Transportation. He mentioned precisely one of the reasons why we were making that groundbreaking ceremony was because of my leadership in Annapolis and getting over $1 billion for Montgomery County to move these transportation projects along. We're talking about the Brookville bypass. We're talking about Watkins Mill Exchange off of 270. All of those projects are going to benefit as a result of the $1 billion that we now have as a result of the gasoline tax.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Leggett.
I'm opposed to M83, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Duncan?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. The top transportation priority for this county has to be to fix and open safely the Silver Spring Transit Center. And the reason for that is we need to restore the trust of the public in the ability of the county government to get things done correctly. And the Leggett administration, the county council have lost all credibility when it comes to the Silver Spring Transit Center. So I'm going to focus from day one on making sure the public knows what we're doing, how we're doing it, what it's costing, and when that transportation center is going to be open. That has to be the #1 transportation priority, fixing the Silver Spring Transportation Center and opening it safely. And we've got issues with the Purple Line, the Quarter Cities Transitway, the BRT that are very important for us as well. I'd like to see us do express lanes up 270, the way Virginia did express lanes in the 495 corridor as a way to help relieve some of the traffic congestion there. And I'm one who has supported implementing and building master plan transportation improvements that are in our master plan. But M83, the concern for me is the cost of it. The costs have skyrocketed dramatically, and it's a question of affordability and looking at what you can do there versus.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Shalik?
Yeah, I'm also against M83. Too expensive, too disruptive to communities. I think, as Phil mentioned, we have to we should lower the fees on the ICC. More people who use it, that should relieve some. It's too expensive to use the ICC. Also, I think it's too complicated for people. Why can't you have toll booths so you can pay cash, or have it make it easier for people? It's too hard right now. And I think we need some common sense solutions too. Coming down 270 every day, it's bumper to bumper. But the other side of 270 going to Frederick is empty. So why don't we use some of those lanes in rush hour, divert the lanes to rush hour direction. Also, the traffic lights should be repaginated too. During rush hour, let's keep the people going, moving. So you need common sense solutions. Buses are the cheapest way to make people use mass transit. I'm in favor of more buses.
Thank you, Mr. Shalik. Next question is about education. It's being asked, I'm asking it on behalf of the African American Chamber of Commerce. We are rightly proud of our education system here in Montgomery County. Our Montgomery County schools consume more than 50% of our annual budget. And what would you do to enhance education programs designed to eliminate the achievement gap, especially in the highly impacted African American and Hispanic student populations, while preserving funding for programs that foster parental involvement in the after-school programs? First question is for Mr. Shalik.
Well, my first priority with education, I told you about my concerns for safety. To me, a successful day as county executive will be at night to know that all the kids are home safe. So public safety is my first concern. Second, we got 10,000 kids in trailers. No bathrooms, temperatures often not working. We got to get all the kids into classrooms out of trailers. And in terms of educational, what to do I have no idea what to do about education and what should be taught kids. That's for teachers and educators. And politicians shouldn't tell the professionals what to do in class. I don't like these standardized rules. The teachers, the principals, they know what to do. They'll have my full support. I'm not going to tell them what to do.
Thank you, Mr. Shalek. Mr. Andrews, same question.
Well, I'm intensely interested in finding ways to reduce the achievement gap because it is unacceptable and it has an impact on the ability of our young people to be successful. We have to address, in my view as well, the engagement gap because I think it contributes a lot to the achievement gap. And the engagement gap is that a lot of students are not getting the type of courses or program that they find relevant to their future and they disengage. So since 30% of students in our high schools have historically not gone on college, and many who go on to college don't graduate in 4 years, we need to provide more opportunities for vocational programs, for internships, for externships, for apprenticeships that help young people find a meaningful career that enables them to support themselves and be independent. We have institutions in place that can help us do that. Montgomery College is an amazing institution. I have served on the Education Committee for 8 years. We need to continue to work on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Leggett.
Well, there are two challenges here. The challenge one is to make certain that the classroom has an appropriate student-teacher ratio, the technology within the classroom, and the facilities that are needed in order to accommodate those things. The second part, which I think is more important, is that we need to reduce the stress that impacts the classroom. Young kids who come to school who are hungry, who do not have proper shelter, who come in crisis, are not in a position to learn. Students who transfer 3 and 4 times throughout the year are not in a position to learn. And therefore, we cannot assume that our teachers and our administrators can assume that burden of a crisis and turn those students into scholars and reduce the class size. We need to respond to the challenges in terms of the class itself, but also the stress that impacts the kids going to school.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Mr. Duncan.
Yeah, great schools make a great county, and when you have great schools, everything else gets better. You get better jobs, you get a better quality of life, you get safer neighborhoods, better educated workforce, and the quality of the schools in Montgomery County really is what set us apart from neighboring jurisdictions. But we've got some real challenges in front of us now. We have many, many, many more kids coming into our schools who don't speak English as their first language. We have many, many, many more kids coming into our schools living in poverty. This is tremendous stress on what's happening inside the classroom. We've got to make sure we've got the funding to help provide for those students and the challenges that our teachers and administrators and support personnel are facing as these students come in. But we also need to make sure that we're getting results. And there was a report recently that said that the achievement gap is widening, that we are not making the progress we had hoped we were making. Should be a wake-up call for our superintendent and the school board. They need to come forward with plans and programs of how they're going to change their programs to address this achievement gap, and then we need to find ways to help support them do that.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Now, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about transportation, we've talked about education, and one of the reasons we're all here today is because we all love Montgomery County, but we also need to find a way to attract more people to our county. This question is coming from the League of Women Voters. A recent report on the county and the nighttime economy seeks ways in which to attract young adults, the 20s and the 30-somethings, to move here and to create the next Arlington, the next H Street, the next Roslyn, the next Courtyard. Should Montgomery seek to replicate those places or creating its own vision for the future? That question's to Mr. Leggett first.
I think we should do both. There are some aspects of what we've seen in Arlington that I think works well for Montgomery County. But there's some other things that we've talked about here on this panel in terms of affordable housing. We can turn Tacoma Park, Langley Park areas into a thriving economy, but we can also do so by displacing people that we want to keep there. You need to do both. And having transit-oriented development and affordable housing, I think, is the right direction to go. The task force is looking at jobs and how we can find and ensure that the people that we want to attract here stay here, that they could walk to their offices, they could walk to their entertainment centers, and that they could live nearby. That's the formula for us. And so there are some aspects of what we've seen in neighboring jurisdiction that works well for us. There's some things that will not. I do not want to see us turn into a center whereby you have a high risk, a high cost of housing, and we displace many of the people that are already here. We can do both, and I think we have an attraction to do that as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Mr. Shalek, same question.
Well, there's been a recent report and a commission, I'm not sure what it's entitled, but they thought that putting more bars in the county and opening the bars longer would attract young people. That's not my style. I disagree with that completely. You're going to attract young people here with good jobs, good housing. Why don't we have a 4-year university in this county? We're bigger than 6 states. Our budget is $5 billion, and we don't have a world-class 4-year university. We should look into that. That'll bring young people here. Jobs, safety, a clean community. The bars will follow. We're not going to follow the bars.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shalek. Mr. Duncan.
Yeah, you know what's really sad about all this is that when I was county executive, Montgomery County was the envy of the region. And you just mentioned all these places that have leapfrogged us and you know, should we become the next Clarendon? Should we become the next Arlington? Well, when I was county executive, they all wanted to be the next Silver Spring. In the last 8 years, we've just let that slip away. And it's very, very frustrating, very sad for us as a community. And the answer that our current county leaders, the county executive, county council, had when realizing that the millennials weren't moving here was that let's create a nightlife commission to find ways to keep our bars open later. That's not the answer. The answer is to create the creative culture, the startup culture, the innovation economy here so that people want to come here to start jobs, to grow jobs, and put it around transit-oriented centers so that they're within 10 minutes of entertaining, walking, dining, working, whatever. That's where the focus needs to be. It needs to be on economic growth and making Montgomery County the startup center again.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Andrews.
We've got to get our competitive edge back if we're going to continue to be a vibrant, growing county and economy and be able to fund the services that people want in the county. The county controls a lot of things. It controls what it sets as taxes. It controls what it spends. It controls at least the amount of effort it makes to get a fair share back from Annapolis, and we need to do far more work there, working with our delegation to do that. Because if the cost of living in the county continues to go up, we're not going to be able to attract more young people to the county, and we're going to lose a lot of the people that we have. So we have to get a handle on the continued increase in the cost of living in the county. That, I think, is the most important thing we need to do in order to retain people and to attract more young people.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. I want to thank everyone for being here today. We're running out of time, so we don't have time for any more specific questions, but I want to thank the panel for the excellent job they did, and I also want to thank the candidates for the excellent job that they have done. And we're going to go directly to closing remarks. And each candidate will have 2 minutes for their closing remark, and we're going to start with Mr. Shalek.
Well, again, thank you very much for including me with the Democratic contenders. I really appreciate that. You know, there's 125,000 registered Republicans in this county, and we don't have a voice in state or county government. I'm asking the viewers to please consider my candidacy. I just want to keep the kids safe. I just want to protect our children, grow the economy. My running mates, we have a great diverse slate. We have a number of Asian Americans running, African American, number of women candidates. Please consider our party. We're a caring party, and we want to do the right thing for this county. You know, one-party rule is not good. There's no diversity, there's no friction of ideas, there's no dialogue, there's no controversy. We want to end one-party rule because it's not healthy. Consider my candidacy, my running mates. We want to bring diversity of ideas to the county, and we think a two-party system would be healthy. You look at the Silver Spring Transit Center, you can't blame us. And we just want to do the right thing. Please consider us. And again, thank you for having me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Shalek. Mr. Leggett, your opportunity.
Thank you. We've heard a great deal today, and I simply suggested we look at the facts, examine them very carefully. It is easy to make statements. It is easy to challenge you with figures that appear to be okay, but you need to really go back and look at it. Secondly, you need to understand the challenges that we faced over the last few years. I mentioned it earlier, but a real challenge here has been to maintain and ensure that we have sustainable budgets going forward. To make certain that we could do all the things that you've heard here today. Cut taxes, yes. Increase spending for schools, possibly. Increase all of the things that we heard today. It is highly unlikely that all of those things could happen the way you heard them today. The real challenge has been things that I've faced over the last few years. That is to close $3 billion in budgetary gaps. Yet, today, we have the highest financial reserves in history of the county, provide $1 billion in state support for education, increase significantly the amount of school construction dollars as well as operating funds, reduce crime 3 times lower than the national average, and have a response time on fire and rescue that's the envy of this area. In unemployment at 4.1% and 32,000 jobs created over the last 3 years that easily exceeds this region. That's leadership in tough times, not in easier times, but tough times, tough decisions, decisions that I had to make as county executive, that when you look at them, no county executive, no mayor, no person in this region made the decisions that Ike Leggett made, and no county has emerged from this as well as Montgomery County. Compare simply the headlines of the last couple of weeks. Fairfax County tax increases $350 per household. Montgomery County, a decrease of $17. That's leadership in tough times. And that's the leadership that I hope you will continue with Ike Leggett. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Mr. Andrews.
Montgomery County needs to get its competitive edge back if it is going to continue to be the progressive county that we want it to be in funding the services that we all value, such as protecting the environment, making sure that we have libraries that are open a sufficient amount of time, making sure that we have adequate funding to take care of people who are vulnerable. We have to be fiscally responsible and sustainable if we can afford to do those things. And the county is not doing a good job in that regard. We've been getting clobbered in Annapolis, which means our local taxes are pushed up. We have seen spending increase on salaries and benefits of 13.5% to 19.5% pay raises in the last 2 years for county employees. That total $85 million. The county is going back to the mistakes that were made before the recession that made the recession much deeper than it would have been. Mr. Leggett talked about the gaps that he closed, but he created some of those gaps with his own policies, with pay raises that had to be canceled because they weren't sustainable. We need to make sure that we are including everyone in our economy, that we are reaching out to young people to make sure they have more opportunities for employment, for experience when they are in high school and college, so they can develop into a career that will be supportive. We need to get back to being on the cutting edge of environmental policies. People need to know that Montgomery County is going to do what it needs to do to contribute to our environmental protection and to reducing our carbon footprint. You know, one of the unique aspects of my campaign is I don't take any funds from interest groups. I'm the only one that has that independence. The county executive negotiates for you. I'm the only candidate not funded by interest groups that the county executive negotiates with. Thank you, and I appreciate your interest in the campaign. I ask for your vote on June 24th in the Democratic primary. Our future is at stake.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mr. Duncan.
Casey, thank you for moderating. Thank the panel for being here. Lena, thank you for being a wonderful timekeeper, and I want to thank Phil, Ike, and Jim as well for being part of a great debate. I got to say that the Washington Post editorial board correctly identified Ike Leggett as the candidate of the status quo. And the status quo in Montgomery County right now is overcrowded schools, a widening achievement gap, according to the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics, leading the state of Maryland in job loss, losing 11,000 jobs here since last July, trailing other counties in growing jobs since 2007, a rapid increase in the number of people living in poverty, and the Silver Spring Transit Center, a transit center that still has no plan that's been told to the public to get open. I'm running for county executive because the status quo isn't good enough for us. It's not good enough for this county. We need to become a national leader again in so many different things. My vision for this county is that we be a center of excellence in everything we do, whether it's our schools, our economy, our transportation network. We got a lot of work to do there. Our environment, everything we do, we should be a center of excellence. And you do that by always looking for ways to improve. And there's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's sort of what we're living with now. We're sort of muddling through things now. When I was at AT&T, 13 years with AT&T, the saying at AT&T was, if it ain't broke, you haven't looked. You can always improve upon what you do. And that's the philosophy that I brought to the county when I was county executive previously. That's the philosophy I'm going to bring back to the county, to bring gigabit internet speeds here, to bring applied science graduate research centers here, to bring transportation improvements, to bring education improvements, to bring a Cycle Montgomery program here, to bring a lot of fresh ideas to move this county forward and make sure that Montgomery County is the leader in the region and the state once again. So I ask for your vote for Doug Duncan for county executive on June 24th. Early voting starts June 12th, and we'll see you at the polls. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. I want to thank all the candidates for being here today. And while you've heard a great divergent discussion and different views, the one thing that comes through from all four of you candidates is your passion for Montgomery County and your desire to make Montgomery County a wonderful place. So I want to thank the audience for being here today. I want to thank you for who are online, who are viewing us right now. Thank the panelists for being here and for asking such great questions. I want to thank our sponsors for helping sponsor this important debate, for participating in this forum. It is just one of the many programs that Montgomery Community Media is sponsoring to prepare the residents of Montgomery County for the upcoming primary elections. Go to MyEMC, I always get this wrong, go to myemcmedia.org to see the program schedule for this debate or watch the debate online. I want to remind you, as some of the candidates already have, that primaries this year will occur on Tuesday, June 24th. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. You may also start voting early next week on Thursday, June 12th at sites all around the county. And if you want to know where those sites are, go to the Board of Education website. They will list them for you. Voting is a wonderful privilege that we all cherish in this county. We've got a great slate of candidates who love this county, and it's a privilege to vote. I hope and urge everyone to do so. Thank you, and goodbye.